3 months ago, something happened that I still can't fully explain. A vision, maybe, or something more. An angel stood before me, not in the blinding glory you'd expect, but flickering. His light pulsed like a candle in wind, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that pressed against my chest. "I need to tell you what I saw in the abyss," he said, "because your descent is coming. This is the story of Uriel, the flame of God, but not the version sanitized for Sunday school, the one recorded in 1 Enoch, chapter 20, verse 2, where he's listed among the holy angels who is over the world and Tartarus. The mission so forbidden that when his name was called in heaven's throne room, every angel froze. Because Uriel wasn't being sent to fight demons, not to deliver messages. He was being sent to witness the damned. And what he witnessed there broke something in him that 10,000 years couldn't repair. But here's what haunts me most. When I asked why he was telling me this, why now, he looked at me with those flickering eyes and said, "Because everyone who hears this story is being prepared for their own descent. The question isn't if, it's when. Have you ever felt called to go somewhere dark? Not by choice, but by obedience. A place where every instinct screams to run, yet something deeper insists you must witness it. Hold on to that feeling, because Uriel's story isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror reflecting our own. By the end, you'll understand why. Let me take you back to a time before the flood, before the Nephilim walked the earth as giants, before the Watchers fell from their posts and taught humanity the forbidden arts of war, sorcery, and seduction. Back when Uriel was simply the keeper of mysteries, the quiet archangel who held scrolls while others made history. Uriel wasn't like Michael, the warrior prince whose sword had cast down Lucifer himself. He wasn't Gabriel, heaven's voice, who'd announced the birth of prophets and kings. Uriel was the one they called when prophets needed visions explained, when nations stumbled in darkness and required wisdom. But here's what the ancient texts don't tell you, what Uriel himself admitted to me in that vision. Deep inside, so deep he barely acknowledged it even to himself, he was tired of watching, tired of being support staff while others shaped eternity. While Michael fought, Uriel held libraries. While Gabriel spoke, Uriel prepared footnotes. And somewhere in the eternal halls of heaven, a small voice whispered in his essence, "When will my mission come? When will I matter? Be careful what you wish for." The day came without warning, as these things always do. The throne room of heaven fell into a silence so complete that even the seraphim stopped their eternal psalm. Every angel present, from the mightiest archangel to the youngest messenger, froze in place, because the voice, the one that had spoken worlds into existence, spoke one word, just one: Uriel. His flame ignited with something he'd rarely felt: hope, purpose. Finally, after eons of waiting, after centuries of watching others receive divine assignments, his name had been called. This was it. The mission that would prove the keeper of mysteries mattered. That quiet service hadn't been wasted. He stepped forward, his light burning brighter than it had in millennia, and waited for instructions. "You will descend to Tartarus." The throne room, already silent, somehow grew quieter. If silence could have weight, this was the moment it became unbearable. Uriel's flame flickered just once as those words settled into his consciousness. Tartarus. The abyss. the place even demons feared. 2 Peter 2:4 calls it the place where sinning angels are cast into hell and committed to chains of gloomy darkness. But that verse, translated into Greek and then English, loses something. The original word is Tartaru, to be cast into the deepest pit, the place beneath, the place of punishment. Michael, the warrior, stepped forward immediately. His voice, which had commanded armies against the dragon, now carried an edge of something Uriel had never heard before. Desperation. "Lord," Michael said, "send me instead. I have walked through war. I have seen the pit, so send me," he pleaded. But the voice remained steady, saying, "Uriel will go." Gabriel turned away, actually turning his back, which was unthinkable in the presence of the throne. Uriel noticed his shoulders shaking once, as if he were suppressing something profound. Raphael, the healer, the one who could mend wounds both physical and spiritual, met Uriel's eyes. What Uriel saw there chilled him more than the command itself. Pity. Raphael, who had seen every kind of suffering, looked at Uriel with pure pity. "No one," Raphael whispered, just loud enough for Uriel to hear, "returns from Tartarus unchanged." Uriel's pride, that same pride that had longed for recognition, wouldn't let him refuse, couldn't let him show fear in front of those who doubted his strength. He drew himself up, made his flame burn steady even though everything in him wanted to flicker out. "I will go," he said, and his voice didn't shake. Not then, not yet. But as he turned to leave, as he passed through the ranks of assembled angels, he noticed something that made his essence cold. They were looking away. One by one, angels he'd known since before time had meaning were averting their eyes. Not in disrespect, in grief, like they were already mourning him. The descent began simply enough. It was beautiful even in those first moments. Heaven above appeared bright and eternal, while stars below glittered like diamonds scattered across velvet. Between them, Uriel descended, his light a single point of fire against the vast darkness. For a while, maybe the first few minutes or perhaps the first few centuries, time stops meaning anything between dimensions. It felt almost peaceful, like a mission, like purpose. Then Uriel noticed something wrong. The stars were dimming. Not because he was moving away from them. Distances in the spiritual realm don't work that way, but because where he was going couldn't reflect light. That was the first warning. The first sign that this place operated under different rules. Rules that predated creation itself. He tried to rationalize it, tried to apply the mysteries he'd spent eternity studying. It's just the absence of divine presence, he told himself, a place God has withdrawn from. But even as he thought it, he knew it was wrong. God is omnipresent. Psalm 139 asks, "Where shall I flee from your presence?" The answer it gives is nowhere. Not even Sheol, not even darkness can hide from God's presence. So if this place was dark, truly dark, it wasn't because God had left. It was because something here was actively rejecting light. Then he heard it. Not with ears. Angels don't have ears the way humans do, but with his essence, with the core of what made him Uriel, flame of God. A sound that wasn't quite sound, more like feeling, like grief compressed into vibration. Thousands of voices, maybe hundreds of thousands, screaming underwater, crying without hope, wailing without end. One Enoch 21:7 describes this place as terrible, with neither heaven above nor firmly founded earth beneath it. When Enoch wrote those words, he was recording what Uriel, had shown him in visions. But that day, before I'd ever met Enoch, before I'd ever guided a prophet through the mysteries of judgment, I was learning what terrible truly meant. You can read about suffering. You can study it, categorize it, understand it theoretically. What you can't do is prepare for experiencing it yourself. The deeper Uriel went, the more his light began to resist. That's the only word for it. Resist. Like his own flame was trying to return to heaven without him, pulling back against his descent. He'd never felt anything like it. His light had always been part of him, obedient, steady. Now it was fighting him, actually fighting, trying to preserve itself even at the cost of leaving him behind. What kind of place, he thought, and now there was fear in that thought, real fear. Makes even light want to flee. That's when the smell hit him. Not a physical smell, this place had no air to carry scent, but a spiritual corruption so thick it registered as sensation. Burning, sulfur, decay. But underneath that, worse than that, was something else. Regret. Concentrated regret so potent it could be tasted, felt, absorbed. The smell of choices that couldn't be unmade, of consequences that would never end. Uriel pushed forward because turning back wasn't an option. Not because he was brave. He wasn't feeling brave anymore, but because the voice had commanded, and he'd spent eternity believing that obedience to that voice was the highest good, even when obedience felt like suicide. The first shapes appeared through the darkness. Massive chains, not made of metal, though they gleamed like iron. 2 Peter 2004 calls them chains of gloomy darkness, and that's actually accurate. These chains were darkness itself, somehow solidified, somehow binding. They stretched into the void, anchoring something, someone. Then Uriel saw him, the first watcher, chained in flames that gave no light. How is that possible? How can fire burn without illuminating? But there it was, fire that consumed without revealing, that tortured without cleansing. The watcher was massive, larger than any angel had a right to be, as if his sin had somehow inflated his form into a grotesque parody of angelic glory. He raised his head, slowly, like even that small movement cost him everything, and their eyes met, because he recognized this being, recognized him. Before the fall, before the corruption, this watcher had sung in the seraphic choir. Uriel remembered his voice, pure as crystal, high and clear, singing praises that made the foundations of heaven vibrate with joy. Now his voice was ash and broken glass. Uriel? The watcher's tone held disbelief. Little Uriel? The quiet one? Why are you here? The way he said it, little Uriel, the way he emphasized you, it wasn't mockery. It was pity. Concern? This fallen angel, chained in eternal torment, bound in flames that would never consume him fully, but would burn forever, looked at Uriel with sympathy. Like Uriel was the one in danger, like seeing a holy angel descend into this place was somehow more tragic than being imprisoned in it. That's when Uriel's pride cracked. The pride that had made him accept this mission. The pride that had wanted to prove himself equal to Michael and Gabriel. It cracked like pottery dropped on stone, and through those cracks, doubt poured in. He was supposed to be the witness, the one in power, the messenger of God, observing the judgment of the wicked. But this watcher's eyes said something different. They said, "You don't know what you're about to see, do you? You think you're ready. You're not." Uriel forced himself to speak, to maintain some semblance of authority. "I am here to witness." His voice sounded thin even to himself, lacking the weight it should have carried. "To testify to what heaven has bound." The watcher laughed. Not cruelty. Worse. Sad understanding. "Testify to whom, little flame? Who needs testimony about us? We're already judged, already sentenced, already forgotten." He leaned forward, as much as his chains allowed, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. Unless you're not here to testify about us at all." Before Uriel could ask what he meant, the watcher turned his face away, back into the darkness, and said just loud enough to hear, "You're here to learn, and I'm sorry for you." Uriel walked deeper into the abyss, and with each step he passed more of them, hundreds. The 200 watchers described in the Book of Enoch, chapter 6, the angels who saw the daughters of men, who found them beautiful, and who abandoned their posts in heaven to take them as wives. Genesis 6,002 mentions them briefly, calls them sons of God, who saw that human women were attractive. But that sanitized translation misses the horror of what they did. They didn't just marry humans. They violated the order of creation itself. These were beings of spirit trying to force themselves into flesh, and the result was catastrophic. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were abominations. Not because they were evil by choice, but because they were biologically impossible. Giants whose angelic DNA created bodies that Earth couldn't sustain. 1. Enoch 15:8-9 explains what happened to them. They became spirits without bodies, trapped between realms, forever hungry for the flesh they'd lost. That's where demons come from, according to these ancient sources. The disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, forever seeking to possess, to inhabit, to experience physicality again. Uriel could hear them even now, those spirits, howling in the spaces between. Neither here nor there, neither alive nor dead, existing in a state that should have been impossible, and their fathers, the watchers who'd created them, had to listen to their children's suffering for eternity. Some of the watchers screamed as Uriel passed, screamed curses. "Light, take your light and leave us. We don't want your witness." Their voices were rage incarnate, refusing to accept responsibility, still blaming God for their punishment, still insisting they'd done nothing worthy of this. But others, and this is what the Book of Enoch doesn't mention, what ancient texts left out because it complicated the narrative. Others wept, actually wept. Uriel passed by one whose massive frame shook with sobs, who repeated over and over, century after century, "We're sorry. God, we're sorry. Please, we're sorry." How long had he been saying that? 1,000 years? 10,000? Would he still be saying it when time itself ended? Uriel stopped. He couldn't help himself. He approached a watcher who wasn't screaming, wasn't weeping, just sitting in silence, staring at nothing. The chains around him glowed dully, binding him to the floor of the abyss, but his eyes were distant, seeing something else, something far away. "Why did you do it?" Uriel asked. His voice was quiet now, no longer trying to sound authoritative, just genuinely wanting to understand. "You had heaven. You had glory. You had purpose. Why?" The watcher was silent for so long that Uriel thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he spoke. His voice was surprisingly gentle, almost professorial, like he'd thought about this question for millennia and had finally arrived at an answer. "We didn't think it would matter. Humans were so fragile, so beautiful, so temporary. We thought—" He paused, and something like a smile crossed his ruined face. "We thought God made us higher for a reason. Surely he'd understand. Surely he'd forgive us." "And did he?" Uriel found himself asking. "Forgive you?" The watcher's smile faded. "Yes," he said, and his voice cracked on that single word. "He forgave. I know he forgave. I can feel it. Forgiveness is like sunlight through water. You can't see it directly, but you know it's there. But forgiveness—" He looked directly at Uriel now, and his eyes held a terrible wisdom. "Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. That's what we didn't understand. That's what no one understands until it's too late. You can be forgiven and still suffer the results of your choices. Forever." Uriel felt something shift inside him. A question he'd never thought to ask suddenly demanding attention. If they're forgiven, why are they still here? If God's mercy is real, if His grace is sufficient, why eternal punishment? That question felt like treason, like doubt, like the first step toward his own fall. But he couldn't unthink it, couldn't unfeel it. Psalm 82:6 suddenly made terrible sense. "You are God's, sons of the Most High. All of you, nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince." He'd read that verse 1,000 times, understood it as poetry, as metaphor. Now, standing in the abyss, looking at fallen sons of the Most High dying eternally, falling forever, he felt it. These weren't monsters. They were sons, and they were dying. Slowly, eternally, consciously. That's when Uriel felt it. Beneath him, beneath the chains and the flames and the imprisoned watchers. Something else, something older, much older. He looked down, though down barely means anything in a place where spatial dimensions don't follow normal rules. And he saw it. A wound, a writhing, formless wound in the fabric of creation itself. Genesis 1002 describes the state of things before God spoke. Creation into being. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. That word deep in Hebrew is tehom, the abyss, the watery chaos that existed before order, before light, before let there be. This was that deep, still here, still writhing, still chaos. When God spoke creation into being, He didn't destroy the primordial chaos. He bounded it, contained it, set limits on it, marked it with divine boundaries that said, this far and no farther. Job 38, Noun 1, records God describing this, how he prescribed limits for the sea and set bars and doors and said, thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. But what Uriel was seeing now wasn't water. It was the principle behind the water. The formless void. The uncreation. Chaos itself. The raw force of entropy and dissolution that God had pushed back to make room for order. And the Watcher's chains weren't just above it. They were anchoring it, holding it, even in their punishment, even in their eternal torment. They were serving a function. Their massive angelic forms, bound in darkness and flame, were acting as anchors, keeping the chaos from rising, keeping it contained. Uriel's mind reeled. This wasn't just punishment. This was cosmic necessity. The Watchers weren't simply being tortured for their sins. They were being used. Their fallen state, their corrupted power, it was perfect for this purpose, strong enough to hold the chaos, condemned enough that using them this way was justice, not cruelty. The chaos sensed him. Uriel didn't know how he knew that, but he did. It sensed order, light, boundary, everything it was not. The formless void began to pulse, to reach, to stretch toward him like oil mixing with water, never settling, always writhing, and with that motion came a voice, not words, not sound, but meaning pressed directly into his consciousness. Light, order, flame, you should not be here. Uriel felt it trying to unmake him, not attack, not destroy, unmake, pull him back into unformed potential, dissolve the boundaries that made him Uriel, individual, distinct, and return him to the raw materials of existence. It wasn't malicious. Chaos isn't evil, it's just chaos. It doesn't hate order. It simply, is disorder. Like cold doesn't hate warmth, it's just the absence of heat. But the effect was the same. Uriel felt his form beginning to blur at the edges. His light, already struggling, began to fragment. Panic, pure and absolute, flooded through him. This was different from fear. Fear you can fight. Panic is when every instinct screams and reason disappears. He was dissolving, actually dissolving, coming apart at a fundamental level. Help, he tried to say, but his voice was fragmenting too, notes scattering across octaves that shouldn't exist. Please. And that's when he spoke, not from heaven, not from above, from inside, from the core of what made Uriel himself, the voice he'd obeyed, the one who'd sent him here. It wasn't loud, wasn't commanding, just present, steady, real. Uriel, be still. And Uriel stilled, not because he chose to, but because that voice commanded reality itself. The chaos recoiled, not in fear, but in recognition, in memory. It had heard that voice before, heard it say, "Let there be light," and watched as its formless dominion shrank to make room for stars. Heard it mark boundaries and set limits and declare what was and wasn't. The voice continued, speaking to Uriel, and through him to the chaos, and through both of them to some purpose Uriel couldn't fully grasp. You asked why they're still here. why those who weep with repentance remain chained, why forgiveness doesn't equal freedom. Uriel couldn't speak, could barely think. But the question pulsed in him. Yes, why? Because my justice requires both truth and mercy. Truth says sin has consequences that span eternity. Mercy says even the fallen can serve my purpose. They hold the chaos. They anchor the deep. And in doing so, they protect every world, every reality, and every created thing from dissolution. This is their penance and their purpose. Uriel felt something inside him break, not sinfully, but break open, like a shell cracking to reveal something new inside. He understood everything now, or began to understand. God's justice wasn't simple, wasn't clean. It was complex and terrible and beautiful, and made his essence ache with the weight of it. You weren't sent to judge them, Uriel. You were sent to understand what it costs me to judge those I loved. Those last words hit Uriel like a physical blow. It costs him. God isn't distant from judgment, isn't cold about consequence. Every fallen angel, every lost soul, every necessary punishment costs him something. And he'd sent Uriel here not to witness the damned, but to understand that cost, to carry that understanding back to heaven, to speak to prophets and mystics with authority that came from pain, not just knowledge. The chaos beneath receded. The formless void recognized it had boundaries, recognized that even here, especially here, the voice had authority. It couldn't unmake what that voice had made, couldn't dissolve what had been called into being. It settled back into its prison, still churning, still chaos, but contained, bounded, held by chains both divine and fallen. Uriel pulled himself together. Literally, he drew his scattered light back into coherence, reformed his essence into something like his original shape. But something was different. His light, which had always burned pure and steady, now flickered, not from weakness, from knowledge, from understanding, from carrying something he'd never been meant to carry alone, the shadow of what he'd witnessed. He looked at the nearest watcher, saw him with new eyes, not a monster, not a simple villain in a cosmic morality play, a son who'd chosen wrong and was paying forever, a son God still loved and had found purpose for even in judgment, a son who held chaos at bay so creation could continue existing. I understand, Uriel whispered, and his voice was changed, deeper, sadder, older and wiser, he thought. I understand now. The watcher, who had pitied him earlier, nodded slowly and said, now you're ready to leave and speak the truth, because you've seen the cost. Uriel turned toward heaven, moving toward the light and his home. But he knew, even before he began ascending, that he'd never fully leave this place. Part of him would always stand in the abyss, always remember the weight of divine justice, always carry the sorrow of what love requires when boundaries are broken. The ascent took no time at all, or perhaps it took ages. Time had stopped meaning anything normal to Uriel. He was aware of passing through the layers of reality, through the cries of the Nephilim spirits, through the darkness that rejected light, through the boundary between judgment and mercy. And then, suddenly, he was back. Heaven, glory, light. But it all looked different now. dimmer somehow. Or maybe his eyes were different. Maybe carrying the shadow of the abyss changed how he perceived even eternal brilliance. The other angels were waiting for him. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, dozens more, assembled in the outer courts, watching for his return. When they saw him, they stepped back, not in disgust, in awe, and in fear. His light looked wrong to them. It still burned, still marked him as an archangel, still proclaimed him as Uriel, flame of God. But now it cast shadows. Light shouldn't cast shadows in heaven. There is no darkness here for shadows to exist. But Uriel's light did, because he'd brought something back with him. Understanding, sorrow, the weight of what justice costs. Michael approached first, his warrior's courage overcoming his shock. "Brother," he said, and his voice was gentle in a way Uriel had never heard before. "What did you see?" Uriel opened his mouth to answer. No words came. How do you explain the unexplainable? How do you describe chaos to beings who've only known order? How do you convey the sound of eternal weeping to those who've only heard eternal praise? He tried to find words, found only silence. Gabriel came closer, his messenger's instinct trying to help translate what couldn't be spoken. "Can you show us?" he asked. "Share the vision?" Uriel tried. Reached out with his essence, trying to project what he'd experienced. The other angels recoiled, not from him, from the images, from the weight, from the shadow his light now carried. They could see glimpses, fragments, pieces of what he'd witnessed, but the whole, the complete understanding, that was his alone to carry. Raphael, the healer, placed a hand on Uriel's shoulder. His touch was warm, trying to bring comfort. "It will fade," he said softly. "The memories will dim. The weight will lighten. You'll heal." But Uriel knew better, knew with absolute certainty. "No," he said, and his voice was quiet but sure. "This is permanent. This is who I am now. The keeper of mysteries who learned the greatest mystery, the cost of love when justice is required." The other angels didn't understand, not fully. How could they? They hadn't stood in the abyss, hadn't watched fallen suns weep for millennia, hadn't felt chaos trying to unmake them, hadn't heard the voice explain that even eternal punishment serves purpose, that even judgment is an act of love, that nothing in God's creation is wasted, not even the fallen. Days passed, or what passed for days in heaven. Uriel mostly stayed apart from the others, processing what he'd experienced, trying to integrate this new understanding into his existence. The other angels left him alone, sensing he needed space. Even Michael, who'd tried to take the mission instead, kept his distance. A mortal prophet named Enoch was being called. A man who'd walked so closely with God that Genesis 5:7-4 says he didn't die. God took him. This man needed visions, needed to understand the heavens, the earth, the fate of the watchers, the coming judgment, needed mysteries revealed that no human had seen before. "Uriel," the voice said, and there was something like tenderness in it now. "You will go to Enoch. You will show him what I showed you. Not all of it. Mortals can't carry that weight, but enough. Enough for him to write warnings. Enough for him to prepare humanity for what's coming." And Uriel went, descended again, but this time to earth, not the abyss, found Enoch walking in a field, already half in the spiritual realm, already sensing something approaching. And over the course of visions that would become the Book of Enoch, Uriel showed him the watchers in chains, the fate of the Nephilim, the coming flood, the structure of heaven, the movements of celestial bodies, the calendar of divine judgment. But Enoch noticed something. When Uriel spoke of the watchers, when he described their punishment, tears ran down his face. Not physical tears. Angels don't have tear ducts. But spiritual tears, visible only to those with eyes to see. Enoch saw them, saw the sorrow that Uriel carried. "Why do you weep?" Enoch asked. "They sinned. They're being punished. Isn't this justice?" And Uriel, who'd been silent about his mission for so long, finally spoke truth. "Yes," he said, "it's justice, perfect justice. But justice, perfect justice, not for the judged, and not for the judge. I weep because I understand what it cost God to bind those he loved. I weep because even their chains serve purpose. I weep because nothing is wasted, not even suffering. And I weep because one day you'll understand too." Centuries passed, millennia. Uriel continued his work, showing mysteries to prophets, guiding seers, explaining divine movements to those called to see. And every time he spoke of judgment, every time he revealed the fate of the wicked, his light flickered. That shadow never left. That shadow never left. That sorrow never faded. When Ezra, the scribe and priest, was given visions recorded in 2 Esdras 4, he asked Uriel directly, asked him to explain why God allows suffering, why evil seems to prosper, why the righteous struggle while the wicked thrive. Questions that had plagued humanity since Eden, questions that plague us still. Uriel tried to answer, gave explanations about time and eternity, about justice delayed but never denied, about purposes beyond mortal understanding. But in the middle of his explanation, he stopped, just stopped. Ezra saw those tears and was confused. "Why do you weep, angel of the Lord?" I asked about humanity's sin, not about your sorrow. And Uriel said something he'd never said before. "I weep because I know what justice costs the one who must enforce it. You asked why God allows suffering. I can't fully answer that. But I can tell you this. He doesn't allow it from a distance. He doesn't watch it coldly. Every soul lost, every judgment rendered, every consequence that must play out, it costs him. And I carry a fraction of that cost. Just a fraction. And it's almost unbearable." That's what Uriel told me 3 months ago, when his light still flickering, still carrying shadows, stood in my vision and said I needed to hear his story. I asked him the same question Ezra asked. "Why are you telling me this? Why now?" His answer changed everything. "Because you're about to be sent into your own abyss. Not the one I went to, your personal one. The darkness you've been avoiding. The truth you don't want to face. The person you refuse to forgive. The sin you won't confess. The pain you won't acknowledge. And God is sending you there not to fix it, nor to fight it, but to witness it and understand what it cost you to hold on to it, as well as what it costs Him to wait for you to let it go." I tried to deny having an abyss, but even as I thought it, I knew deep down. We all know this truth. We all have that place. That darkness we pretend doesn't exist. That chaos we've contained but never confronted. And Uriel's message, delivered through tears and flickering light, was clear. The time for avoiding it was over. Your descent is coming, he said again, not as punishment, as preparation. Because only those who've witnessed their own chaos can speak truth to others. Only those who've stood in their own darkness can carry light that matters. Only those who've truly understood the cost can appreciate the grace, he said, beginning to fade as his form dissolved back into the realm where angels reside between missions. Yet his final words lingered in the air, heavy and certain. The question isn't whether you'll descend, as everyone eventually does. The question is, will you witness what you find there? Will you let it break you open so something new can grow? Or will you run back to the surface and pretend you're still whole? I didn't have an answer. Still don't, if I'm honest. But I know this. Since that vision, since hearing Uriel's story, I've been seeing my own chaos differently. The things I've hidden, the pain I've buried, the brokenness I've pretended was strength. It's all still there, waiting, like the primordial deep beneath the watcher's chains, contained but not resolved, bounded but not healed. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Uriel's mission, the forbidden one that changed him forever, was never just about witnessing fallen angels. Maybe it was about teaching a truth that heaven needed earth to learn. That confronting darkness doesn't make you dark. That understanding judgment doesn't make you judgmental. That carrying the weight of what love costs doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole. So here's what I'm left with. A story about an angel who descended into hell and came back changed. A mission so forbidden that even now, speaking about it feels like revealing secrets too heavy for words. And a question that won't leave me alone. When your descent comes, and it will come, what will you do? Will you witness? Will you let it break you open? Will you carry back the understanding that costs everything but gives meaning to the cost? Or will you run? Uriel is still out there, still serving, still showing mysteries to those called to see. But he's different now. To this day, according to ancient sources that track such things, he's the only archangel who weeps during judgment. The only one whose light casts shadows. The only one who understands, really understands, what it costs God to love a fallen world. And maybe that's his real mission, not to witness the damned, but to remind us that even in judgment, especially in judgment, love is present, costly, painful, but present. Your descent is coming. The question is, are you ready? Are you willing to witness what you've been avoiding? Because here's the truth. Uriel learned in the abyss, the one he's trying to teach anyone who'll listen. You can't carry light into darkness if you won't acknowledge your own shadows. You can't speak truth about grace if you won't face what grace costs. You can't understand love if you've never felt the weight of what love requires. So maybe, just maybe, the forbidden mission wasn't Uriel's alone. Maybe it's all of ours. To descend, to witness, to understand, to carry back something that costs everything but changes everything, to become light that knows shadow, fire that's been tempered, flame that's learned to weep, The choice, as always, is yours. But the invitation has been given. Your descent is waiting. Will you descend or will you run? Because here's what Uriel wants you to understand, what he spent eternity learning in that single mission. The darkness you're avoiding isn't your enemy. It's your classroom. The chaos you've contained but never confronted isn't trying to destroy you. It's waiting to teach you what order really means. The judgment you fear facing, whether from God or from yourself, isn't meant to break you. It's meant to break you open. There's a difference. Breaking means shattering, ending, becoming less than you were. Breaking open means cracking the shell, releasing what's been trapped inside, becoming more than you thought possible. Uriel went into the abyss whole, proud, eager to prove himself. He came back broken open. His light flickered, his confidence shattered. But what emerged from that brokenness was something heaven had never seen before. An angel who could speak about judgment with tears, who could explain divine justice while feeling divine grief, who could hold both truth and mercy in the same trembling hands. That's what your descent is for. Not to make you less, to make you real. Think about what Uriel witnessed down there. Fallen angels weeping for millennia, their tears accomplishing nothing but still falling. That's the cost of holding on to what you know is wrong. The Watchers chose pleasure over purpose, chose immediate gratification over eternal glory, and they got what they chose. But they also got something they didn't choose. The eternal knowledge that their choice was wrong. The permanent understanding that what they grasped for wasn't worth what they lost. You're doing the same thing right now. Maybe not on a cosmic scale. Maybe not with fallen angels and Nephilim and primordial chaos. But you're holding on to something. Some hurt you won't release. Some pride you won't surrender, some person you won't forgive, some truth about yourself you won't acknowledge. And every day you hold it, you're building your own Tartarus, your own prison of chains made from darkness, your own eternal flame that burns but gives no light. Uriel saw what happens when you hold on forever. When you refuse to let go, even after millennia of suffering, when you'd rather be right than be free. The Watchers who screamed curses at him were the ones who'd learned nothing, who blamed God for their choices, who insisted that their punishment exceeded their crime. They were still fighting, still resisting, still refusing to witness their own responsibility. But the ones who wept, the ones who said, "We're sorry," over, into the darkness, they'd learned something. Not enough to be freed. Consequences don't work that way. But enough to be honest. Enough to stop pretending their choices didn't matter. Enough to finally witness the truth about themselves. Which one are you? The screamer or the weeper? The one who blames others for your chaos or the one who finally admits you helped create it? Because that distinction matters, not for your salvation. That's already settled if you've accepted it, but for your sanity, your peace, your ability to carry light that means something instead of light that just burns. Here's what Uriel learned that changed everything. The chaos beneath the Watchers, that formless void from before creation. It wasn't evil, it was just chaos. raw potential that could become anything. And when God spoke, "Let there be," he didn't destroy that chaos. He gave it boundaries. He said, "This far and no farther." He transformed infinite destructive potential into finite creative reality. Your chaos is the same. That darkness inside you, the formless fears and unprocessed pain and buried shame, it's not inherently evil. It's raw potential waiting for God to speak order into it. But he can't speak to what you won't acknowledge, can't transform what you won't expose, can't boundary what you keep hidden even from yourself. That's why the descent is necessary. That's why Uriel had to go down before he could come back changed. That's why you have to face your abyss before you can carry real light. Because pretend light is easy. Surface brightness that never costs anything. Smile and say you're fine, and keep the chaos contained, and never let anyone see what's really churning underneath. But real light, the kind that Uriel carries now, the kind that can pierce darkness because it's been to darkness and came back, that light costs everything. It costs your pride, your pretense, your carefully maintained image of having it all together. It costs the comfort of not knowing, the safety of never looking too deep, the convenience of surface-level faith that never demands you actually trust God with your worst parts. And here's the thing. Uriel went alone. No other angel went with him. Michael offered, but the mission was specifically for Uriel. Because some descents can't be shared, some darkness you have to face by yourself. Not because God abandons you there. He doesn't. The voice spoke from inside Uriel when chaos tried to unmake him, but because the lesson you need to learn is yours alone. The brokenness you need to witness is yours alone. The transformation that happens in the abyss is personal, intimate, impossible to delegate. You can't send someone else to face your chaos for you. Can't hire a therapist to do it while you watch. Can't read enough books or attend enough services or memorize enough verses to avoid the actual descent. Eventually, and this is what Uriel is trying to tell you, eventually God calls your name, speaks it across heaven, and says, "Descend." And when that happens, you have two choices, the same two choices Uriel had: obey or refuse, go down or make excuses, face it or run. There's no third option, no compromise where you sort of look at your darkness but don't really engage with it, no halfway descent where you stick your toe in the abyss but keep your body in the light. It's all or nothing, down or not. Uriel chose down, and it broke him open, changed his light forever, made him carry shadows for eternity, but it also made him who he was meant to be, the keeper of mysteries who actually understood the mysteries, the one who could guide Enoch through visions of judgment because he'd felt judgment's weight, the one who could explain God's justice to Ezra while weeping because he knew justice's cost. What will your descent make you? What will break open inside you when you finally stop running? What light will emerge from your darkness when you let God speak? Let there be into your chaos. You don't know yet. Can't know until you go. But here's what Uriel promises. What's waiting on the other side of your abyss isn't destruction. It's transformation, not an ending. a beginning, not death. Birth, but you have to go, have to descend, have to witness. And that's terrifying, because descent means losing control, means admitting you can't fix yourself, means exposing what you've kept hidden for so long, means trusting that the voice that sends you down will also bring you back. And trust is hard when you're staring into your own personal Tartarus. Here's what helps. Remember why Uriel was sent. Not to judge the watchers. They were already judged. Not to free them. They couldn't be freed. Not to fix anything. Just to witness. To see. To understand. To carry back knowledge that would cost him everything, but would make his service meaningful. Your descent is the same. You're not going down to fix your darkness. You can't fix it. Only God can do that. You're not going down to judge yourself. You're already judged, and if you're in Christ, you're already forgiven. You're not going down to earn anything. Nothing you find there will change God's love for you. You're going down to witness, to finally see what you've been avoiding, to understand what's been churning underneath your surface for years, to let God show you what He sees when He looks at your chaos. And when you see it, really see it, when you witness your own fallen angels and hear your own Nephilim crying and feel your own chaos trying to unmake you, something will happen. Will say, "Be still." Will remind you that even your deepest darkness has boundaries, that even your worst chaos is contained, that even your heaviest shame is carried by someone stronger than you. And then you'll understand what Uriel understood. That judgment isn't cruelty, it's clarity. That consequences aren't punishment, they're teachers. That the cost of divine justice is matched by the depth of divine love. That God doesn't send you into darkness because He's abandoned you. He sends you there because He trusts you to come back changed. Uriel came back with flickering light and permanent shadows, but he also came back with authority, with understanding, with the ability to speak truth that costs something. And that's what's waiting for you on the other side of your descent. Not perfection. Perfection is for those who've never faced their darkness, but authenticity, depth, light that's been tested and proved real. So your descent is coming. Maybe it's already here. Maybe you're standing at the edge right now, feeling the pull downward, hearing your name called, knowing the time has come. And you're afraid. Of course you're afraid. Uriel was afraid. His light tried to flee back to heaven without him. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. But here's what Uriel would tell you if he were standing in front of you right now. Light flickering, shadows dancing, tears ready to fall. Don't run. Don't make excuses. Don't pretend the call isn't real. Because running just delays the inevitable, makes the descent harder when it finally happens, turns what could be transformation into trauma. Go willingly, like Uriel did, even afraid, even uncertain, even knowing you'll come back changed. Because the change is the point. The brokenness is the point. The shadows your light will carry afterward are the point. You're not meant to stay the same. You're meant to descend, witness, return, and serve from a place of understanding that only comes through personal abyss. And when you come back, when you've witnessed your chaos and heard the voice speak stillness into it, and felt your boundaries reestablished and your light reformed, you'll be different, permanently different, like Uriel. You'll carry shadows. You'll flicker sometimes. You'll weep when others might judge. You'll understand costs that others never see. But you'll also carry authority, real authority, the kind that comes from having been to hell and come back, the kind that speaks truth with tears, the kind that holds light and shadow in the same hands and doesn't pretend either one isn't real. And people will sense it, will step back in awe and fear like the angels did when Uriel returned. Not because you've become dark, but because you've become real. That's what your descent is for. That's why the mission is forbidden. Not because it's wrong, but because it's sacred. Too deep for casual discussion. Too costly for shallow faith. Too transformative for those who just want easy answers and comfortable religion. It's the mystery beneath the mysteries, the truth that only those who've descended can fully grasp, the cost that only witnesses can accurately count. Uriel paid it. He's still paying it. Every time he guides a prophet, every time he explains judgment, every time his light flickers and his tears fall, he's still carrying what he witnessed in the abyss, still feeling the weight of divine justice, still understanding what it costs God to love a fallen world. And now he's asking you, inviting you, warning you, your descent is coming. Will you witness? Will you let it break you open? Will you trust the voice that sends you down to also bring you back? Will you become light that carries shadow, fire that's learned to weep, flame that's been tempered in your personal Tartarus and emerge stronger for the breaking? The choice is yours. It always has been. Free will is the gift God gives that makes love possible. But know this, if you choose descent, if you choose to witness your chaos instead of running from it, you won't go alone. The voice that spoke from inside Uriel will speak from inside you. The boundaries he set on primordial chaos will hold your chaos too. The love that sent an angel into the abyss to learn what judgment costs is the same love that will walk with you through your darkness. You might come back changed. You will come back changed. But you will come back, flickering maybe, shadowed perhaps, weeping possibly, but real, authentic, whole in your brokenness. Light that matters because it's been tested. Fire that burns with meaning because it knows what it costs to burn. That's Uriel's message. That's his forbidden mission finally revealed. Not just to witness the damned, but to teach the rest of us how to witness our own damnation and find grace in the witnessing. How to descend into personal hell and discover that God was there all along. How to face our chaos and hear him say, "Let there be," over our darkness, just like he said it over the primordial deep. Your abyss is waiting. Your chaos is contained but restless. Your descent has been prepared. And somewhere, in the spaces between heaven and earth, Uriel's light flickers. His tears fall, his shadows dance, and he waits to see. Will you go? Will you witness? Will you return changed? The answer determines everything, not your salvation. That's settled. But your transformation, your depth, your ability to carry light that matters in a world drowning in darkness, your capacity to speak truth that costs something instead of platitudes that cost nothing. So this is where the story ends. or where yours begins. Uriel descended, witnessed, returned, changed forever. Now it's your turn. Your name is being called. Your mission is waiting. Your chaos needs witnessing. Will you go, or will you run? The forbidden mission isn't Uriel's alone anymore. It's yours. It's mine. It's every person who hears this story and recognizes the invitation hidden in the warning. Descend. Witness. Return. Serve from the authority that only brokenness brings. Your abyss is calling. What will you answer?